Your brain is lying to you. Not in a motivational way. I mean it literally. There's a ceiling built into your nervous system, and you've been living underneath it your whole life without ever knowing it was there. In 2012, a woman in Georgia named Angela Cavallo was out in her front yard when she heard something. Her son Tony was underneath his car, a 1964 Chevrolet Impala. The jack had slipped and it had come down on him. Angela ran over and lifted it off the ground, held it up long enough for two neighbors to drag him out. Witnesses said it felt like several minutes, though it probably wasn't. Then she put it down. And later that afternoon, when people asked her to show them what she'd done, she couldn't even budge it. The same woman who just held a car off her son with her bare hands stood there and couldn't move it an inch. Which raises the only question worth asking. Where did the strength go? The answer isn't really about muscles. It's about a system your brain runs constantly, one you never notice and almost never get to see working. Right now, your muscles are capable of a lot more force than you ever ask of them. That capacity is genuinely there, in the fibers, in the chemistry, but your brain won't let you get anywhere near it. There's a mechanism called the Golgi tendon organ. Sensors running through your muscles and tendons, feeding information back to the brain constantly, and the brain uses that information to hold you back, deliberately. Neuroscientists call it protective inhibition, basically a limiter, which makes sense when you think about why it's there. Muscles contracting at full strength can genuinely tear themselves apart. Tendons can snap, bones fracture under the force of the muscles pulling against them. So somewhere back in evolution, the brain learned this the hard way and built a ceiling to stop it happening again. Most of us are walking around at something like 60% of our actual capacity. Not because we're weak, because our brain decided 60% was the safe number. That ceiling was never your limit. It was just a decision your brain made for you. What happened to Angela is that ceiling came off, just for a moment. Her body flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, faster and heavier than it ever does normally. Her heart rate spiked, blood flooding her muscles. And the pain signals that would usually stop her, the ones designed to trigger before things get dangerous, got completely overridden. Her brain looked at what was happening and made a call. The danger in front of her mattered more than the risk of tearing something, so it pulled the ceiling off just this once. She wasn't suddenly stronger. She was exactly as strong as she'd always been. The thing that stays with me about this is that nothing changed in her. That strength existed on every single ordinary day she ever had. When she was making breakfast, when she was gardening, when she was doing absolutely nothing remarkable whatsoever. It was always there, underneath everything, waiting. Her brain just never once decided the moment was worth opening that door. Until her son was under a car. And suddenly it was. This isn't a one-off. There's a whole list of similar stories. Tom Boyle, in Arizona in 2006, lifted the front end of a Camaro off a cyclist who'd been hit. Held it for something like 45 seconds. That's roughly 800 kilograms. A teenager in Virginia lifted a tractor off her dad. In South Africa, a man held a vehicle up long enough for his wife to crawl free after a crash. These have witnesses. Some are documented properly. And in every single one, the pattern is identical. Someone they loved was in danger, and something opened that had never opened before. There's a term for it. Acute stress response, if you want the clinical version. Most people just call it hysterical strength, which is a strange name really, because there's nothing hysterical about it at all. It might be the most focused thing a human body ever does. It just needs a reason the brain considers worth it. And this is where it stops being about cars, because you've got a ceiling too. Everyone does. The physical one just happens to be the dramatic version, the one that ends up on the news because a woman lifts a car and nobody can quite believe what they saw. But the same mechanism runs almost everywhere else in you. Your brain manages how much fear you can push through, how much discomfort you'll actually sit with before giving up, how much of yourself you get access to on a completely normal Tuesday. And it sets all of those limits the exact same way it set the physical one. Cautiously, safely, on the assumption that an ordinary day doesn't need the door fully open, which most days is probably true. But think about what that means for a second. The version of you on an ordinary day, the one who gets tired, who stops when it gets hard, who hits a wall and just assumes that's where it ends, that's not really you. That's your brain's cautious guess at what you'll need when nothing is actually at stake. On a normal Tuesday, Angela Cavallo could not have lifted that car. With her son underneath it, she could. Nothing about her had changed. There's a scientist called Tim Noakes who spent years studying elite athletes, trying to understand why they hit the wall. That exact moment where the body just says stop. And what he found, again and again, is that it usually isn't the body deciding that at all. It's the brain. He called it the central governor. The idea that something in your brain manages your output the same way a governor manages an engine. Never letting it run flat out, because flat out, for long enough, would damage the machine underneath. People argued with him when he first said it. That's changed since. And what it points to is something slightly unsettling. That almost every time someone believes they've hit their absolute limit, they haven't. They've hit the limit their brain was willing to give them that day. The real limit sits further out. Nobody really knows how far, because almost nobody ever gets there. Almost nobody ends up in the moment Angela ended up in. The one where the brain looks at what's happening and quietly, just this once, takes the ceiling off. Most of us are never going to lift a car. That's not really the point of any of this, though. Whatever Angela reached for in that moment wasn't something new. It was already in her. Through every quiet, uneventful day she'd ever lived, waiting behind a door her brain had simply never needed to open. It's in you as well. Right now. Sitting underneath whatever limit your brain has quietly decided is enough for today. Your brain is careful with you. It manages you. It keeps you sitting comfortably inside boundaries that feel, from where you're standing, like the actual edge of what you can do. They're not the edge. They're just where your brain chose to put the fence.